Yeah, I think we had quite a tight affair back at our offices in about September last year. I think we met quite a few of you. Steve sent his apologies, can't be here today. So he sent me instead. For those who don't know me, I'm Paul Johns, so I'm Steve's right-hand man at Visual DJ. So we run the Birmingham Tug. It's the first hybrid we've done, so I was expecting a few issues, but Steve's disappeared off to Turkey and left me to deal with that. So we've got 3 excellent speakers today, 2 in person and 1 online. So we've got Sarah Bartlett, we've got Benford, we've got Annabelle Rincon. Sarah's going to start us off. And Sarah's a Tableau enablement consultant at Red Hat. She leads their Tableau Centre of Excellence, supporting the global Tableau community. Formerly a Zen Master, which is now, is it Data Visionary now? Zen Masters? Yeah. Data Visionary. And Sarah's going to talk us through design thinking approaches for dashboard design.
How do you want me to connect up mine?
I think you should just be able to share your screen and then just use the speaker the microphone. There should be fine. Just a minute. So Sarah, have we got any screen sharing capabilities? So you might want to make.
Okay, so.
Oh, it's okay. We've got it now.
Yep. You are the host now.
We're all sorting that. Thanks, Sarah.
Sorry, I'm just running a screen, just bear with me. I already went
There you go.
It doesn't look like I'm going to be able to get it. So it's both things are exactly the same. Right, I'll have to do it without my notes. Never mind. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Bartlett. Thank you for the introduction. I'm a Tableau enablement consultant at Red Hat, like was mentioned. So I work with our global Tableau community. We have about 8,000, 9,000 users globally. So we help enable them with all things Tableau. That includes training, enablement, onboarding, and consulting with our internal teams. I'm a 4-time visionary and a 5-time Tableau public ambassador. It makes me feel really old. I've been around Tableau for quite a long time. I'm a co-leader of the London Tableau user group, so we're one of the biggest user groups globally, and also one of the oldest as well. I think we're the second one ever. First one was Atlanta in the US. And I'm also the founder of the Iron Quest community project. That's a monthly project modelled on the Iron Viz competition. I'm not going to talk about that today, but if you're interested, feel free to ask me at the end more about it. So I'm going to assume that everyone in the room at some point has built a dashboard. Am I correct? Yeah, and everyone online, I'm sure you've all built a dashboard. No, Annabelle, you've built plenty of dashboards. When you built those dashboards, how did they make your users feel? Did they feel empowered, in control and enlightened? Or maybe did they feel confused, frustrated or overwhelmed? And I really, really hope no one looked like that emoji on the bottom right. But I think ultimately we build these dashboards, and sometimes I think we're guilty of not spending enough time with our users to really understand what they need and understand if the dashboards are really hitting the mark. I know I've looked at dashboards where I work and I've certainly felt overwhelmed and confused and not sure what the designer was trying to get to when they built the dashboard. So I think it's really important that we work with our users to have a better understanding of what it is they need. And one way to that is with UX design principles that we're going to talk about today. So UX design is all about understanding your users' needs. And I think we're guilty when we build dashboards of maybe not doing enough of this. I think we can get so sucked into the requirements and we just take what the user asks as a given. So they'll say, you know, I want to show this, this, and this. And they won't really tell you why or what they're going to do with it. And then you build the dashboard exactly to what they asked for. And then they're like, no, that's not what I wanted. And then the dashboard doesn't get used. So I think this is where these principles can come in really handy. And today I'm going to show you a model that you can pick ideas from. In theory, I could talk for hours about each of these kind of theories and principles, but hopefully you'll get some inspiration and you can take these away and apply them in your own work. So if we think about just a typical dashboard and what goes into it, this is a dashboard by Zainab Aidemeji. So she's a Tableau ambassador. It's a dashboard she entered for the real world fake data challenge, which is a monthly challenge, which gives you fake data, but based on real world challenges. So this one is for a call center. And I think, you know, it's pretty good. If I was to think about a call center dashboard, I think this touches on the key points I'd expect to show on a dashboard like this. And I mean, this is it's obviously a fake scenario, but I think she's done a good job of potentially anticipating what the users might want to see. You can see here, you know, when they receive the most calls, how those trend over time. You've got some key performance indicators as well. And then it's a highlight table showing that, you know, where you've got some hotspots. And this is actually one of 3 dashboards. So if you go on to Tableau Public, and I can show these slides afterwards if you're interested, you can see there's much more to this than just this one dashboard. But everything we look at here is we're only really thinking about what we can see. We're not thinking about too much at this point about what the requirements were or anything like that. So really, if you think about dashboard design, it's made up of a couple of layers. So the layer at the very top surface is the things that we can see. So on that dashboard I just showed you, this is just what we saw on the page, so the lines, the bands, the bars, and that kind of thing. Now underneath that, we think about the structure. So when we're putting the dashboards together, we think about how we're going to lay things out on the page and make the most intuitive sense. And I think, you know, Zainab's done that really well with this kind of a column-like structure, which a lot of people follow, and it seems to work pretty well. We then think about the user flow, so how people are going to interact with the dashboard and what that journey is going to be. So when they click on a button, where's that button going to take them? Are you going to have tooltips and what they're going to have in them, and that kind of thing. Then we have the scope and requirements. So this is typically the stage when you meet with your stakeholders and understand what it is they want to see, where the data is, what questions they want to answer with the dashboard. And then the very bottom of that iceberg, we have the strategy. So this is where we really set out the basics of who's the user, what problems are they going to try to solve with the dashboard, what are their pain points, and the potential business value that the dashboard will bring. Now, I think when we're building dashboards, we're often guilty of spending too much time on the upper part of this iceberg, thinking about what things are going to look like, making sure it looks nice and it's all aligned and the colors are right and you can interact with it well. And perhaps we often overlook those bottom 2 layers, so really getting to the crux of what it is people need, what their overall strategy is, and how they're going to use the dashboard. So I'm going to talk through today a framework and design process that you can follow to get to those points and nail those 2 bottom parts of the iceberg. So then we end up with hopefully a better overall dashboard and something that's actually adopted by users. So this process kicks off with a discover stage. So this is where you seek to understand who your users are, what their needs are, what they need the dashboard for, what questions they're trying to answer. Then we'd move on to the distill phase. So this is where we talk about what their goals are. So we have a look at what they said, and then we interpret that, because what they say isn't always what they want. So this is where we interpret what we've learned and then take that away and decide what that information looks like and what their needs actually are. Then we would ideate. So this is where we typically do things like wireframes and come up with ideas that are potentially going to enable them for success. After we've ideated, we'd go away and actually build the dashboard. And I'm not going to be talking about anything to do with that today. That's kind of outside of this process. Once we've built the dashboard, we would then look to validate. So we would share those designs with them, and we do this multiple times along the way, but ultimately share the design with them at the end, and we'd look for where we can improve. So we'd ask them things, you know, is this what you wanted? Maybe we'd do some user sessions, user labs, what I call them, where you work through with the users and you watch them interact with the dashboard and see how they're using it. Are there points where they're getting confused, they don't know how to proceed, or maybe it's just not hitting the mark at all. So I think this process works really well in fixing those issues that perhaps we sometimes overlook, and without focusing too much on the overall like look and feel of the design. So I'm going to go through this one by one, and ultimately we want to look at those first two, the discover and still, to really strengthen those bottom layers of the iceberg, and then the last two, ideate and validate, really help tie everything together. So starting with discover, this is where we look to identify our users and understand their needs. And the two things I'm going to talk through today that come under this phase are requirements gathering and the 5 whys. So I want you to remember that you are not the user. I know that sometimes I think we're guilty of falling into the trap of thinking we know what the user needs. And it might be obvious sometimes, and we might be thinking, they're definitely going to want this kind of dashboard, but ultimately we're not the user. And I think we fall guilty of kind of making these assumptions that aren't necessarily true, which is why it's really important that we get to the real crux of what it is they actually need before we start building anything. We can do this through requirements gathering, and this is just the kind of standard requirements gathering process. So this is who is going to use the dashboard, so identifying our audience. We want to understand what they're trying to understand and monitor. We want to understand how they're going to use this information. So once they have the dashboard, what will they do with it? We want to understand how often they're going to use the dashboard, so that the way we design a dashboard, this will influence the design. If they're going to be using it every day, it might be something that they just want to look at quickly, spend a few seconds on, and move on to something else. If they're going to be using it less often, they probably won't remember how to use it the next time. So maybe it's something you might need more instructions to go along with. We also want to understand how they're going to access the dashboard. So if they're primarily going to access it on their phone, that what we design is going to be very different to what they're going to primarily access, maybe on a desktop computer, or even if something that's maybe going to be on the wall somewhere on a screen. Again, we'll have a different design for each of those scenarios. And we also want to understand how familiar they are with the data, and also how familiar and comfortable they are with data overall. So how data fluent are they? That again is going to influence our design and the kind of charts and things we include. If you're showing this data to an audience that has no understanding of the data whatsoever, we're probably going to need to include a lot more maybe instructions, pointers, and descriptions to help them understand that data and what's being presented. So I really want you, when you're going through this stage, to question the obvious. It's all about questioning, and really getting to the bottom of this. I worked in consulting for 4 years, and I did a lot of this, working with clients to build dashboards for them. And it never ceases to amaze me the number of times we were always about to build something and then we found out something else about the users that completely changed the direction that we were taking things in. So a great way to do that, and the technique I use, is the 5 whys. You may have heard about this before, but let's follow through an example and see how it works. So in this scenario, a stakeholder has requested a new dashboard. So we ask them why. And they want to see the impact of an online training course. Cool. Okay, so we'll ask them why again. And they want to understand if employees are completing the course. We want to see overall course completion rates, that kind of thing. So we ask them why again. They say they want to see which teams have completed the course and where we could improve. So maybe they want to look for areas where people aren't doing the course, or maybe they're stopping halfway through. We could stop at that point and we could argue that we have enough information to go away and build the dashboard here. But I'm going to ask why 2 more times. So we ask why again. They say to show the leadership team how well we are doing across the organisation. So at that point, we've got a new audience, like persona, that's come in the mix that perhaps we may have missed if we hadn't asked that 4th why. So I think that's really important. And we also want to understand how we're doing across the organisation as well, something that perhaps I didn't mention before. If we ask why 1 final time, they say so leadership can take action to encourage more enrolments where needed. So again, something that's come out of that process that perhaps we would have missed had we not asked why that many times. And this is just a basic example, but it does apply to any situation. I think it's a really powerful tool that you can have in your toolbox. When we talk about the discovery as well, ultimately the goals we want to get to are to identify who our users will be, and we want to find out as much as we possibly can about them. We want to identify their business value questions. So typically these are aligned to business goals. So this could be, are we on track to meet our quarterly targets? And that's typically something we would seek to answer with the dashboard. We want to define their so what, so the potential business impact. So often people will say, I need a dashboard, and they don't need a dashboard at all. They might just need a table of data. They think they need a dashboard. They don't always know what they want, and that's why it's important we work with them to really understand what they need and why and what they're going to do with it. We want to seek to understand their current challenges. So have they got loads of dashboards right now that they hate and they're struggling to use them? It's not going to help if we just add another one to that mix. We want to understand what their challenges are today, and see if we can address those challenges through the process. And we also, and most importantly, want to understand what action the dashboard will enable users to take. So what change will this dashboard bring? So once we've completed discovery, you would move on to distill. So at the end of discovery, typically we're going to have a lot of information, and we want to distill that information down. In this phase, we want to define the strategic vision and goals for the dashboard, and we also want to define our user personas. User persona is one of my favourite exercises to do, but really this helps us to walk in the user's shoes and really understand who our users are, what their preferences are, what their needs are, and what their likes and dislikes are. With our personas, we'd look to understand the common goals or challenges across job functions or perhaps roles. Just because some people do the same role doesn't mean they're the same persona. You might have what we call sub-personas. So there could be sales managers in the north are very different to sales managers in the south, for instance. But we wouldn't assume that just because someone's a sales manager, they fall under the same persona. We would find this out through our discovery, that maybe we have differences between those personas as we're working through, and that's where we'd identify a sub-persona. We ideally want to have a unique dashboard experience per persona. That's obviously not always possible. That might end up in multiple dashboards that we can't produce, but we can achieve this with things like filters and other techniques you can take in Tableau to give everyone their own dashboard experience. But we want to make that experience as seamless as possible. We don't want to create one dashboard that answers all the questions for all the people, because typically those dashboards don't work and they don't get used because they just don't hit the mark. And really, we want to refine those personas through research. So at the end of discovery, we're likely to know a lot about our users, but if there's anything that's unclear, we can continue that research process. We can meet with our users, we can have stakeholder interviews, and we can really refine those down. Once we have the personas, they're valid throughout this process. They may even be valid for other projects as well. I know where I work, we do a lot with personas, and we recycle those personas and use them for different projects and things like that. Typically, we would put personas on a template, this one, so we can see at a glance a little bit about the user. We typically give them like a little character. It's not a real person. It could be someone, just someone to represent that persona. Maybe even give them a fake name. We'd give a quote from one of the people that fall in that persona to help bring that persona to life. Maybe something about a challenge they're facing or how they feel. And we typically want to include things about their background, their preferences, of how they like to consume data, how they consume data, so how they're going to be looking at dashboards, how frequently they're going to be looking at those dashboards. We want to understand their goals, their motivations, their targets, and their pain points. And this is really important. So this is where perhaps things aren't hitting the mark today. We want to understand what's stopping them from being successful and frustrations of the current state. So once we have our personas, we can think about them like this. So I have two scenarios here, one for an executive and one for an analyst. And this is just really to emphasize the differences between those two personas, the executive and the analyst. If we think about how familiar they are with the data, and how familiar they need to be with the data, the executive probably doesn't need to be all that familiar with the data. At a high level, maybe enough information. In terms of frequency and how frequently they're going to look at the dashboard, probably not going to look at it hourly, right? They're probably going to look at it much less frequently than someone who's more intimate with the data. The time they spend with the dashboard is likely to be very short. They might just have, it might even be a minute less to have a look at that dashboard and get some insights from it. So whatever you design needs to be something that they can consume quickly and find those insights from quickly. In terms of the outcome, if you think of them as a decision maker, they're right on the end of that scale when it comes to making the decisions. So they're going to be a key person when it comes to outcomes. And when it comes to detail, they're going to probably want something that's quite simple. It goes back to the point around the amount of time they're going to be spending with the dashboard is probably going to be quite low, so the detail needs to be simple as well. Now, if we contrast that with the analyst persona, the analyst is likely to be quite intimate with the data. They may have even built this dashboard themselves. They're going to know it inside out. They're likely to be a subject matter expert. They may be looking at the dashboard on a very, very regular basis, very different to the executive. And the time they spend with that dashboard is likely to be much more. If there could be an exploratory dashboard where they're really delving in and finding those insights, and they're likely to spend hours with it. When it comes to the outcome and the decision, they're not the decision maker. They're more likely to share an insight with the decision maker, so the decision maker can make that decision. And when it comes to detail, they probably want something more complex, much more complex than the executive would. This is an example of what you potentially do with what you've learned with the personas. When it comes to strategic vision, at the end of this phase, we'd likely want to understand the goals, so the business value and impact of the dashboard, desired in outcomes, so the actions and the actions needed to drive those outcomes. The people, so we will have identified our audience and their goals and challenges with the persona exercise. We want to understand a timeline, so what's going to be delivered when, and this really helps to keep everyone to account and communicate how we're progressing against that timeline. It can also be helpful when we're working with multiple different people that help bring the dashboard together. So you might have data engineers. It can be helpful that everyone's aligned and you don't begin a project and then it's around the time that the key person that you need is going to go on holiday for 2 weeks. I know when I was in consulting that happened all the time. So then it delayed things because we couldn't get to the data and then everything else was delayed. And then obviously this is very key, but you're going to want to understand your data sources so you can actually build something. So once we have all that information, we've got a ton of stuff to ideate with. So we really want to kind of distill everything down, like we did in the previous stage, find inspiration and start wireframing. So this is where we start putting those ideas together and putting them in front of people. So as I said, you're going to have a lot of information, so you need to get it down somewhere. I like to use things like Miro for this, so it really helps to bring things together, especially if you're working in a virtual environment. You can get other people in as well and they can add their inputs. It's great to seek inspiration. So I'd definitely suggest leveraging things like Tableau Public, and I've also got Dribble on here as well as inspiration when it comes to dashboard design. So by this point, you're going to know the kind of dashboard you're going to want to build. Sometimes, I know for me, I hit that creative block. So I always go on to these sites to have a look at what other people have built. And it might be just inspiration around the interface design, not so much like the dashboard itself, but I might be looking for some inspiration on how do I want my filters to look, for instance, or what kind of buttons do I want to have it to use? And that's where Dribble can be really useful. And on Tableau Public, I think they just announced they've got, I'm probably going to get this wrong, I think 5 million dashboards, or business, something like that. They just hit a milestone. There's tons on there, and it's much easier now on Tableau Public to actually find dashboards if that's what you're looking for. I know I use my favorites button a lot, and typically our favorite, anything that I really, really like from a design perspective or any business dashboards that I can use for inspiration. So definitely have a look on there. If you go to the homepage and scroll down, there's a whole section on business dashboards that I found really useful. Now you're all inspired, you're ready to build the dashboard. Before you do, definitely go into wireframing. The wireframing is typically made up of 2 phases. So you can start with a lo-fi wireframe, which is something that you can scribble on a piece of paper. Some people like to do this in PowerPoint, and all those other tools like Balsamiq as well. And you typically start with the lo-fi wireframe before moving on to the hi-fi wireframe. It's funny because Steve's watching this, he just put out a blog post this week about wireframing and the importance of wireframing. Hopefully it proves what I'm going to say. But I was speaking to some of our users where I work recently, and they were like, we haven't got time for wireframing, strict design, like it's not for us, not got time, our users haven't got time. And I can't stress how much I disagree with that message. I think this is so important. Really, at this stage, you can put your ideas on paper, we can put them in front of the stakeholders and really understand what it is that they need. Often at this stage, you'll put something down on paper and they'll be like, oh, no, that's not what I had in mind at all. Like, and then it really helps you to get the ideas and everyone on the same page. You can also clarify any, especially with the hi-fi wireframe, you can potentially avoid building things in Tableau and spending a lot of time and investment building things out that aren't going to land correctly. Where I work, we use Figma for the hi-fi wireframe, and you can almost it's the experience is very similar to Tableau. If you build it out, look and feel like a Tableau dashboard, your users wouldn't know anything different. You can build out the interactions there, so they feel like they're interacting with a dashboard, and really it's just images, there's no data behind it. And that can be really powerful because it saves you a lot of time. It doesn't, you don't have to touch the data. You can just put something together that they think is a more finished, polished product, to make sure that you're validating their experience and making sure that you're hitting their needs at that stage before you invest all that time in designing something in Tableau. In both of these phases, particularly the low wireframe stage, I would say don't include numbers. The minute you start including numbers, particularly if they're just example numbers, people will be like, oh, that number's wrong, oh, that's completely wrong. Like that's why I blanked out the numbers here. So those blanks where you typically where you'd include those KPIs, but every time I've included numbers here, people have just got so hung up on the numbers, they've kind of blocked out the design completely. Yeah, so that's I can't stress how important wireframing is. It doesn't need to take a long time, especially with the low-fi wireframe. It could be something you mock up in a meeting in front of people, or something in your own time, and maybe you just take a picture and share that and just say, hey, this is what I had in mind. I'm on the right track. So once you've got your wireframes, everyone's agreed, you go away and build the dashboard. And then once you've got something to show, this is when you move on to the validate phase. This is where you verify that you have built something that meets the needs. And then you could also do some lightweight testing or user labs as well. Before you to go and meet with the stakeholders, it can be helpful to get lightweight feedback. They could be with stakeholders depending on your relationship with them, or it could be some team members that you work with. And if we think back to Zainab's dashboard at the beginning, lightweight feedback could include just putting that dashboard in front of some people, and they might just tell you, oh, you know what, you've missed something here, or perhaps it would be good if we move this, just to get that kind of feedback before you go to the next stage and share it with the end users or the stakeholders. Here I've added some examples. It could be that we had a target line on those line charts, maybe we had a feedback button for dashboard feedback, and maybe I forgot to include weekends on that heat map. So just things I can fix easily before we move on to the next stage. This can be really helpful and might just save some time and save that into a creative process, and might have a lot back and forth otherwise. And then you want to move on to user testing, and this is my favourite piece. This is the most insightful, I think, the most insightful phase of them all. And this is where you actually sit down with users and watch how they interact with the dashboard. So you put it in front of them and see, and you give them typically some scenarios to follow, and you see how they interact. And we did this with a dashboard where I work, and it was incredibly successful. We saw where users intrinsically went to click on things, maybe that wasn't always the right place. So then that helped us design something that was going to meet their needs, and be aligned to what they were used to. And you can run these in person or virtually. Where I worked, we did it completely virtually with people around the globe. The way that we did it was we got them on a call, we got them to share their screen, and then we went through some scenarios. We gave them a list of questions or tasks. So perhaps it was, what was sales in this year in this region, and saw if they could get to that answer using filters or different interactions. And we also asked them things like, where would you go to find out this? And just kind of get their response and gauge if it was right. But I think what's really important in this stage is you ask users to think out loud, so they talk through what they're doing. And that's where you'll get the kind of overall sentiment. They'll be like, oh, I can't find something, or that's not where I expected it to be. Any little insights like that can be really useful, because you can take those back and modify your design with those insights. We actually rated the comments that they made, whether it was positive or negative or neutral, and that helped us prioritize how we were going to address those feedback points. So you might be thinking, when will I be finished? This is a lot. And it's an iterative process. And I would say you're finished once you get to the point where the users can confidently interact with the dashboard. They verify that it is what they need. And yeah, so you'll be finished after that point. So to recap what we've gone through, as I said at the beginning, I think there's too much emphasis on the overall look and feel of dashboards, and we often overlook those fundamental points around this overall strategy, the vision, and the requirements. We can use a design process like the one I've gone through today to discover, distill, ideate, and validate, to really understand what our users need and help address those fundamental points before moving on to validation with our users. This is an iterative process, so just because I have it on the screen this way, and you typically follow that from left to right, from discover to validate, you don't have to follow that in order. You could go from discover straight to ideate and then back to distill. You could go to validate and then back to distill if you've missed something. You can go either way. It just depends. And I think you would know as you're working through this process if perhaps you've missed something, or maybe you need to validate your personas a little bit better when you get to that end stage. There's no reason why you can't go back. So you might be thinking, I'd love to put some of this into practice, but that's a lot. Where do I begin? So I would say definitely start small. Maybe you have some dashboards today where you could apply this process. Maybe you start off with user testing. So you put the dashboards that you use today in front of people and get their feedback and watch them interact with those dashboards and see perhaps their overall sentiment or where they're going wrong. You could look for quick wins. It might be you're about to start a new dashboard project. Maybe you just look to bring in that wireframing process if that's not something you already do, and just see if that lands and if it helps you with the overall design. And I'd say definitely does help look to design repeatable processes. So if you're going to go through this, perhaps if you're going to run those user labs and you're going to ask questions, design something that you can use again and again, and perhaps other people in the organisation can leverage as well. Just saves any unnecessary rework. If you're looking for some additional resources on dashboard design and overall UX design, and there's some books that I'd like to recommend here. I'm sure everyone here has heard about The Design of Everyday Things. It's a classic book around UX design, but it's a great one. Also suggest looking at Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, which is focused more on web design, but it's very applicable to how we design dashboards. Also, The Elements of UX is a great book. And if you're not already familiar with it, The Big Book of Dashboards is what it says on the tin. It's a big book of about 20 dashboards, but it is great if you're looking for inspiration when it comes to dashboard design. So thank you for listening today. Hopefully you've been inspired. Has anyone got any questions?
Thank you for that. You mentioned a couple of tool sets potentially that you could use to design the dashboards during the wireframing process. Could you just remind me of what that is?
So my favourite is Figma. So Figma.
Figma.
Yeah, so it's a free tool. It's a design tool, so you find a lot of designers use it. It's actually been bought by Adobe, so it's almost like a lightweight Adobe, but you can build out things that look like the dashboards you're going to have in there. And you can actually build out the interaction as well. So you can tell that if you click here, then go to this view. That's how you can replicate that process and look and feel of the dashboard. Another one is Balsamiq. Is that BALSAMIQ? I think it's called, which looks very much like that wireframe I had on the left. It creates just very basic lo-fi wireframes easily.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
So a couple of questions. Thanks for that, by the way. In terms of wireframing, do you think it's ever appropriate to offer the user to get involved with the lo-fi part of wireframing? Because sometimes users do like to say, this is what I had in mind. So is it to encourage that, or is that?
Yeah, I love that. So if they're willing to do that, absolutely. I would say don't, just because they say they want something doesn't even always mean it's the right thing. But you can work with them on that. But it helps you get what's in their head down on paper, which I find really useful when I'm designing. So yeah, if they're willing, definitely. And
then my other question was about the validate stage. Because obviously sometimes you can give a lot, and sometimes there might not be very much of content.
Yeah.
So in your experience then, is it better to start with too much at the validate stage and have that brought down in terms of the amount of information and the amount of things, or is it the case that it needs to be more the other way around, because once things are there, they tend to stay?
I'd say you start too much. I think that's how I found having too much is better than having enough, because I think if you don't have enough, you start making assumptions and they might not necessarily be true. I worked, when I was in consulting, I worked with the design team. We were on a UX project, but not dashboard specific. We had a room dedicated to us in this building in Canary Wharf, and we literally covered the walls with sticky notes. And you couldn't see the walls because we had so much feedback from interviews and just meeting with users. So I think obviously we weren't going to use all that feedback, but just having that and being able to synthesize that was really useful. So I'd say start with too much if you can, if you have the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
We've got an online audience as well, Sarah. So Jackie, if we have any questions online?
No online. Just Annabelle said that was great, Sarah.
Thank you, Annabelle.
If anyone does have any questions, we can always answer them offline as well. So just pop them in the chat, and Jackie can consolidate those for us, and we'll get back to you after the session.
Yeah, and I'll share my slides so you have a copy of them, that you can share them out.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
I think you'll all agree that was really useful. So thanks, Sarah. So hopefully that's all resonated with you. Definitely going to be nicking a few of those ideas, if that's okay with you, Sarah.
Go ahead.
So Benford's our next presenter. He's a strategy consultant, formerly community and transformation lead and chief data officer at Jaguar Land Rover, where he delivered more than 560 million of benefit by focusing on problem framing and developing a data culture. Benny's going to take us through 10 years of Tableau lessons from analyst to chief data officer. Thanks, Benny.
Thank you. A second to screen share. Maybe, yes. Back, let me. Yeah, it's saying I need to. I had to leave Zoom and come back because I've just told, sorry, two minutes. My Mac will not allow me to share the Zoom without restarting Zoom. Leave open. It should.
So this way, having just a single computer.
Live demo, the one thing in life you do not want to work with.
I don't know if anyone else uses a Mac for Tableau, but I know there's a lot more books in Mac than there is in Windows. Whether that's on purpose from Microsoft.
Really, Tableau don't really. Tableau mostly Windows people, as in the company. I've heard the comments when they merged with Salesforce, lots of showing that video. Right, click to it. I think, Jackie, if you make me a presenter again.
Bear with me, sorry.
All right. All right, everyone.
So William.
Screen.
Stop.
Hey.
It's crossed. All good. Thanks, Benny.
Cool. So as far as I can work out, it is actually 10 years since I started using Tableau. It's the month I started using it in Easter 10 years ago, which means I can do a quite nice one-off story because I've literally used it from analyst to chief data officer. And it's not much of an exaggeration to say it's kind of on a par about whether Tableau or JLR accelerated my career more. So I want to talk through how it's helped at different stages. And for me, data is about value and how you connect to value and how you spread that. So my background, I was at KPMG 10 years ago as an analyst. And the stories that I'll talk through, and I'll go through them kind of in detail as we go through. I went through, Tableau's fast, this is cool. I can explore things, but maybe it's not all about exploration. I need to get to actions as well. And then 6 years ago, I moved to JLR, and my roles there varied from community lead to transformation program manager to the first chief data officer. And the different icons we've got on there at the moment. What am I doing? I'm working in stealth mode on a startup, a non-profit startup, which I'm happy to tease a little bit about. A member of Data Leadership Collaborative, which Tableau run. And my proudest little thing is I left JLR. That's now on the CEO's desk and on my desk. My first 2 weeks, I got a mission statement, which is what everyone does when you join an organization, a new team. And on the second last day, I got signed off, which was complete. And the goals, relevant to this, the goals were to get value from data. We had 560 million of accredited value. To have a self-service analytics revolution. There's over 4,000 Tableau developers at JLR today. And crazy figure. if anyone knows about data apprenticeships, 17% of people in the UK doing a data apprenticeship are now doing it at JLR, and get competitive advantage from data. So that's the story that I want to talk through and give. Really, Tableau's meant different things to me at different stages, and I've used it in different ways and share some of the learnings. So first was this, and I imagine this was everyone's first impression. It's cool, it's fast. I love the first time I used it, we had a client that was a consultant, and they weren't sure whether they wanted the incremental cost of getting Tableau licenses. So they said, well, can you develop me a dashboard in Excel, and can you develop me a dashboard in Tableau? And it wasn't fair, because whilst I was a pretty damn good Excel modeler at that stage, the other person on the project had been using Tableau for a while, so we had a face-off. And I showed the Excel model to the client, and they were, wow, and I was quite happy with that actually. And yeah, you know whatever happened. Goodbye Excel, Tableau came in. And what I started to do was realize you can create dashboards really, really quickly. And I got a bit of a reputation at KPMG because I realized for accountants, there's pretty much only one dashboard that you need for a CFO. You take the accounts and you drill down through profit hierarchy and you show variance, and ended up with a reputation that if you sent me the accounts, I could create a dashboard in 10 minutes that you could show to someone. And it gets them interested, and it's really cool. And it just under 10 minutes, we timed it. I got it just under 10 minutes once, but you use that trick of copying a thing, creating the interactions, changing the thing. You drill down very quickly, and people are excited. And it's all about data exploration. And they're excited because it unlocks something they've not been able to do before. They've previously been frustrated, and they can start to ask lots of questions. Very quickly, you go, why am I asking questions? What's this for? And the feeling fades a little bit. So the story I want to talk through, and what I realized when I agreed with Steve to present, I was still at Jaguar Land Rover. And it occurred to me when I started making the slides this week that I'm now independent. I no longer have access to any prior materials. So there are no dashboards to demonstrate in this. There's some very funky mock-ups, but unfortunately no dashboards. So the trick that I learned and ended up duplicating for how to create action was quite a simple one. There's a lot that Sarah said that's relevant to this. And I first learned this when I was working with the NHS. One of the clinical commissioning groups was a large repeat client. And we did a dashboard which allowed them to show per capita spend on a type of disease intervention. So the particular example we looked at was diabetes care by different GP practice. And great, so some at the top, they're above the average, we'll highlight those, the rest of them below the average. Ta-da, that's where we need to look at a diabetes problem. If you've ever worked with doctors, they've got a good statistical background. They'll give you this long list of why that is not at all relevant. So the populations will vary by GP, both on their age, on their health, on their ethnicities, on all sorts of things that mean that looks nice, but it's not relevant. And we spent this cycle for a long time desperately trying to go, well, how do we come up with a dashboard that is relevant, that can cut through all of this, and that we can't present something and they go, why have you considered this? And we went down the route of, well, let's bring in age. Let's bring in all the things you mentioned. Let's bring in deprivation. Let's bring in social figures. And it's really hard to quantify these things. So we ended up instead, did very, very simple recreation here clearly, plotting the intervention against the disease. So per capita spend on intervention versus per capita spend on prevention. So if you are spending, you should expect a nice straight line, right? So if populations are an area where you would have high diabetes, you would expect to be spending more on intervention. And if you had an area population that was very young and healthy, somewhere like Birmingham University, much lower rate of diabetes, you would expect to be spending a lot less on intervention. But there's a certain segment which immediately stands out, that you've got a lot of intervention, but you're not spending much on prevention. Then that's an issue. So it's simple, it cuts through everything. We don't need to say, how old are you? What are all of the social factors? We can just cut through and go, that doesn't make sense. Or at least it doesn't make sense enough to go and ask further questions. We might not immediately be able to draw the conclusion that that GP practice in the top left-hand corner is under prioritizing a certain area of care, but we can start to go far enough to, well, we should look at this in more detail. And it turns out that this type of approach is a repeatable pattern. I'll get to this. But the next step was, well, what do we do? How do we start to address this? And sometimes when you do this type of analysis, it's quite obvious what the next step is. But sometimes you do this type of analysis, it's not obvious how you move from one area to the other. You're looking at something that's correlated and it's not obvious. So the next thing is just to add time on. You can probably only just about see that on the screen, but you can do different comment charts, we call them. You can do in Tableau a comment chart that shows where it was 12 months ago, 24 months ago, and where it is now. And then what you can quickly start to identify, the one in green. Ah, interesting. So we've decided that the ones in the top right as you're looking at it, left as you're looking at it, sorry, is the top left are problem ones. 24 months ago, someone was up there as a problem one and they've moved to a good area. So now automatically you've got something that's actionable. There's an obvious thing to go, maybe something population demographics happened. Maybe it was something that's a non-controllable intervention, something changed in the system you don't have an impact over. But you can go and reach out to that person and go, what did you do? You seem to be a success story. And this is a reproducible pattern. You suggest a problem in a target group. You as the analysts are not the experts. You put up something as for people to tear down. They will tell you every reason why that target group that you've identified is not something to target. Take it, so this is healthcare, retail, a bunch of shops that aren't growing as fast as the other shops or aren't as profitable. Whatever it is you're trying to drive, education, so some schools where the standards are not improving, whatever it is, identify a group and just put it up for debate and be given all of the reasons why it's wrong. Then finally agree a target group. So agree with your group, this is a way that we can go, this is something that's worth investigation, and then come up with analysis which goes who used to be in the target group and who isn't now. And that's a repeatable formula for analysis, that the way I describe it, that goes beyond the data, because the next step is to go and meet the people who had the problem and no longer have the problem and ask them what they did, and that's not in a data set. But it's a repeatable means of intervening. So that was a pattern we started doing when I was at KPMG, and where we started developing dashboards that quite quickly ended up with complex change programs coming off them, where this had just guided you to where to learn from. Meant to have a screen in between, so I will go back and have a screen in between. So I then moved over to JLR about 6 years ago. The reason I moved is consulting can get quite frustrating if you've got slightly divergent brain and want to experiment with new ideas, because you can't persuade people to pay for stuff you've never done and you don't know if it's going to work or not. So instead of having a company that paid me to do stuff that we didn't really work on, and I'm not interested in cars in the slightest, but car companies are pretty damn cool because they design, manufacture, distribute, engineer, service, sell. It's a really interesting environment to get to understand how things work. The person I joined to work with was the Chief Transformation Officer, who's just made CEO in the last few months. And the role was to set up an analytics team, which happened about the first 2 years, and then it transitioned to an interesting conversation of, we've shown we can get value from the central data team, can we get value from data from everyone in the organization? And it was something we discussed in the first interview, but we then had a play around with doing it, and that's the journey I want to talk through. And the way I always described it to my team was, it's like this. It's a technology adoption curve, if you've ever seen it before. It's heavily used. There's 2.5% of people who are innovators. As soon as something new exists, you don't even need to tell them. They probably got there before you and they're playing around with it. We love these people because they fund all technology. I have gone through countless e-ink displays before e-ink displays were actually useful. So they're the innovators. You then get the early adopters. They need a signal from the innovators that this was actually something that's worth testing. They're not going to go and test something they haven't heard of, but once they've heard a few people saying it's cool, they'll go and play with it. The early majority, they need a sign that this is not a fad. They really need, and they probably need a little bit more support. The late majority reluctantly don't want to be missed out, and the laggards still have landline phones. They won't get that. So this is how we've always talked to us at JLR around pushing Tableau out, pushing ways of working out across an organization. And the hypothesis that we have is if someone uses Excel for more than 8-10 hours a week, they should have access to Tableau. It's nuts. Excel is older than me. It's insane. It came out the same year as the Sony Walkman. Think about how many changes there have been in music since the Sony Walkman was released. It's nuts that we're still using Excel. So the audience that we were targeting is everyone that used Excel we should be a Tableau developer. And this was how our change journey went. 2016, the innovators started to play around because they had access. 2017, more of them got access. 2018, and I'll explain why afterwards, but I think this is a common thing that happens in a lot of organizations. 2018, we had massive success. We took on the next group, we took on the early adopters. 2019, it slowed down a little bit. 2020, very, very little happened. 2021, very little happened. 2022, boom, we took on a large amount of the area. And what changed? That's the story, really. So beginning, what happens here? You set up, you install a server, maybe some people don't even need a server. You get it approved for procurement, large organization, some people get licenses, they play around. 2017, we permitted people to do this. So you didn't actually have to push through yourself. It was just permitted. If you had a manager approved, you could have access. And I send out a Google sheet, and I just remember seeing it go nuts with all of these cursors appear as people would enter their name for some training, and people started using it. 2018, the thing you might have heard about, because the story from what we did here, we've spoken about quite a bit. We set up a champions program, and a lot of organizations have done this. So we managed to get into corporate comms. Tableau is out there, you can use it. There's a process to use it. We got about 200 people globally signed up. We weren't sure what we'd get, and this is the scary thing about when you do these things, but we just went through, well, we can work out what to do with it. There was a global group, so we ran some hybrid training across the world. We didn't really have any budget. So we had budget for the licenses, but not for training. So we got free training from Tableau. We pointed people towards videos. We told them to go to Tableau user groups, gave an inspirational talks, got people like Chris Love to come along and give some talks, basically pulled on favors, even went as far as there's a TED talk about education that we shared, which is a brilliant, going slightly off piece to apologies, but brilliant example of how groups can learn. Someone did an experiment with education in India where they put a computer terminal in a hole in a wall in villages that didn't have access to the internet previously to see what would happen. And the kids learned to use the computer with nothing. And the person cutting the amazing TED video short pushed it as far as he could. And one week he turned up with a USB stick and the kids were excited, what have you got for us this week? What have you got for us this week? And he said, oh, this is going to be too complicated for you, I'm sorry. Next week I'll come back with some other stuff. And next week he came back and said, well, what did you see? And it was PhD level papers on cell replication, and they explained how cells replicate. People can learn a lot by being in self-learning groups. So we gave that story and we told everyone to form self-learning groups. And some amazing things span out of that. Some people, it helped them to change their careers, but that's the early adopters. That's who they are. That's what they do. They go and learn stuff. You don't need to do much more. And 2019, we thought this is brilliant. We just need to keep inspiring people. So we kept picking up the comms. We took new success stories. We communicated them. We kept communicating them. Didn't really change things much. So lots of comms around. And then I highly recommend everyone does this, but it didn't really go much further. And we started questioning, actually, is our hypothesis right? Can everyone use Excel pick up Tableau? 2020, clearly COVID, pause, not much happened. JLR, the vast majority of people were furloughed for a long period of time. 2021, we really picked up, this is it, we're going to crack it. So the problem is licensing. People don't have access to enough licenses, it's causing restrictions. Our servers kept having freezes. So we moved to Tableau Online, or Tableau Cloud as it's now called. Gave everyone in the company access. Everyone can click on this, you can share with whoever you want. Lots more success stories, lots more company comms. Not much changed. A little bit, it moved forward a little bit, but it was quite disappointing actually. 2022, what changed? We went for more funding to keep going forward. And I won't take credit from this. It's the person who's now CEO who said, look, you know, I'm supportive of this, but when are you going to bloody finish rolling out? And how do we just do this? And we looked at it a little bit differently. We recruited someone who didn't come from a data background, had change management expertise. And they said, well, this is just like an Office 365 rollout. Okay, so what do you do there? Like, let's not try to go through this from a data perspective at all, where you communicate to every function that's coming, you give everyone the deadlines. So commercial, your time for training is between January and April. Use it or lose it. Purchasing, your time for training is May, ... Communicate the timelines. Make sure that there's face-to-face training available. So there clearly was budget. We've got large engagement with Tableau for professional services. We also use apprenticeship schemes in a big way, but make sure there's more training options available. Set the deadlines. Accountability. It's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to make sure it was provided. With board support, we had an accountable director in each function to make sure this actually worked. That really helped. So it really showed us the power of customization. I don't know what size organizations you're in, but in most medium plus size organizations, I think people have got bored of reading emails, but they're more likely to read their functional email. So when you start breaking out of the center and going through the closer you can get to comms that are targeted to the individual, the more powerful they are. So the commercial function, story will come up in a bit on that, but the director there, the board member there really pushed it. And it changed the needle. We went from, I mean, numbers wise, we went from having about 1,000 active developers to 4,000 within 15 months. And really active. It changed. It's a standard tool. So it's a really interesting journey to go through. And it proves the hypothesis that it should just be a standard tool. It requires some investment for sure. The returns were huge, however. Next point I was making, so the other story is sharing around this and what's the role of the center. So if you now move to the point where you believe this is a distributed capability, everyone should do this, then what's the point of the central data team? Because they don't have a unique skill set anymore. My pet hate phrase when I was in charge of data transformation was, this is purchasing data. Really? Purchasing is a separate legal entity. It doesn't have to share with other functions in the organization. You hear this in a lot of companies. This is finance data. And people weren't sharing. And we actually showed that people weren't sharing. I've clearly recreated this, but we created a chart on Tableau where we took all of the log files. We said, who's the owner of the content? Who's the consumer of the content? What function are they in? Yes, everyone uses their own information. We're a siloed business. And it was a brilliant chart to show people. The assumption was that people didn't want to share because of this hate that I have. But it turned out that when we questioned people, sharing is very hard. I met a lady in engineering who was really quite angry about it. She said, I love Tableau, but I hate it. It's become my job to manage access because we've created something that's so useful, the whole company wants access, but it has to be slightly restricted. So I spent half my damn week adding people and removing people to this thing. That's insane. When we migrated our server, I described it this way. We had 5,000 users at that point and 1,000 projects. That's 5 million decisions. It's actually a lot more than 5 million decisions because when you choose to give someone access, you choose the type of access you give them, et cetera, et cetera. That's nuts. That's a really complex problem. When we analyzed it, we used TCS to manage the server. They ended up with 2 people just managing Tableau access requests. With emails all day, it's stupid. So what we did was to put in place an access model where this changed things massively, and I'd recommend everyone does this. Everyone has functions, great. So we can have a root folder. It's purchasing. It's which function is responsible. That helps with levers because you've then got a responsible owner. Then we came up with this concept of themes. So in commercial, you forecast your volumes of vehicles. You look at marketing attribution. We agreed about 12 themes per function, and there was a process to request new ones. But you had to then save your content either in a sandpit or in one of these areas. And it did 2 things. It reduced the complexity, thousands of projects massively. There were a few complaints, which were quite amusing complaints, because someone would say, I can't accept this, I'm not migrating to this area. Well, why not? Well, I'm going to have to save my content in the same area that everyone else is working for. Ooh, it's really useful. I'm going to see everyone else is working on forecast. They literally start complaining and realizing it's really useful to force collaboration. And what we already knew is that lots of the business, there were people working on the same projects in different areas who never knew each other. But by forcing cataloging based on what it's for, we could move people together, we reduced complexity, and then we could come up with security rules based on this. This is this is company secret information. It's to do with new vehicles. Every director in the business can have access by default, others have to request permission. This is just proprietary information, just give everyone in the company access by default. Why do we even need to waste time? And literally in 3 months, that happened. I've made up the statistics because this is a recreated thing, but it was almost exactly like that. It was nuts. We did the migration, and within 3 months, people were collaborating. It was incredible. It was so the myths around people don't want to share. I think sharing's hard. It's the job of the centre to solve sharing. And then the last point I'm going to make in the story before I wrap up, is the most important part of this is where we got to the transformation program, 250 million per year of benefits, is remembering to have fun. So the dashboard I really couldn't recreate for this, but I want to tell the story. We started to really play with the log files on server. And for anyone who's got a decent sized Tableau setup, there's so much valuable and fun and stuff in between the two, stuff that you can do with the log servers. So we created what we called the yellow pages. You could see every workbook on the server, except for ones that were deemed of a certain level, whistleblower reports, a very, very small minority. You could see everything, even if you couldn't access it. And you could see how used it was. And then you could, so you knew it was there and you could request access. Again, de-siloing the business, encouraging collaboration. But the really fun one, we created a gamification report based on the log files that it was like gamification on any computer game. What have you and haven't you done on Tableau? Have you published a metric? Have you consumed in this way? Have you created a report that 30 people have used and gave different points for these different things? Gave it points to the whole organization. And one of the most fun I had was then going to a board meeting and showing off by dialing, whilst I was physically there, joining the meeting on Teams on my mobile and showing them the mobile version of the app and saying, I'm winning. Because you got grouped based on your grade, I guess. So all directors were shown in a group, the managers were in a group. Commercial directors, you're not doing bad, and the FEs just catching up behind you. It was great fun. And we had a look at it, and they then started gamifying it to the point that the board member for commercial actually, if you want someone to show how you drive change, emailed the whole function and said it's ridiculous that I'm in the top 10 for this function. Why are you not using data more? So really gamify it, and there's so much fun you can have with those log files. And it's so important to change. You've got to have fun as you go through this. So that's really the summary. There's lots more kind of I could think to share, but the main things that I've learned as I've gone through, really Tableau as an analyst and as a product manager was a way to get to value quicker, to find ways to do analysis that cut out the decision, the procrastination. There's a lot of people who look for reasons why we can't make a decision, but to go where you've got everything you now need to make a decision, and that's undebatable. It's now over to you. And really, really great way to add value. You can drive value quite quickly that way. As someone responsible for a change program, it's a brilliant tool because it gets people excited. And there's things you can do at every stage of the journey. You can build communities very quickly with no budget, but there's massive return if you do get budget in the rollout. And that's something I'm trying to build the case for now. I'm independent. Why just infuriates me why more businesses haven't done this. It's why so many people are working in technology that's older than most of the workforce. It's just bizarre. So yeah, that's the story. What am I doing now? I'm continuing to do some member of the Data Leadership Collaborative, working on a non-profit that's partly aiming to solve this problem. I think the data market's fast. The technology companies aren't very good at rolling out change because they're incentivized to not have services, and you need services to roll out change, but you get a higher multiple of valuation if you don't have services. And the consultancies don't want to do data transformations because they want to sell data services. So I'm working on something that's going to help you do that transformation. Open for questions. If you want to know more, I'm starting to do quite a lot on LinkedIn. Reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to chat to people.
Cheers, Bennett. Any questions for Bennett? So Jackie, have we got anyone, any questions online?
No questions online, no.
Okay, no worries. How many we got online, just out of interest?
6.
Oh, okay, good stuff. Well, thanks very much for that, Benny. Really appreciate it. I'm sure Annabelle appreciates getting a little bit more time in because I think she's squeezing a lot into her session. So thanks again, Benny. So as I've said, it's a hybrid session. Annabelle's our guinea pig for doing the online section. So hopefully we don't have any gremlins. Annabelle's led various data teams over the past 15 years. She's now leading the Tableau Centre of Enablement at Vontobel. She's recognised as a data visionary, and she also co-leads the Data Plus Women in Zurich. And Annabelle's going to take us through LODs, strike the right note. Thanks, Annabelle.
Thank you for inviting me. I learned already a lot from like the different speaker that you had today. So let me share my screen, and I have like some boring style to start with, and I have like my camera that is doing a weird zoom in, but that's fine. Now it's fixed. I am like so let me share my screen now that you have deconcentrate myself. I always miss up when I'm sharing my screen. So just some word about me. I am leading the Tableau Center of Enablement for a Swiss bank called Vontobel. My passion in life are absolutely Tableau and visual analytics. I have like the great privilege to have been a named visionary and ambassador this year. So thank you very much to anyone who have voted for me. And I'm also co-leading 2 initiatives, Data Plus Women Zurich, which is an initiative to promote women working with or on data, but it's not data minus men. So men are always welcome in our group. And then I'm also leading a virtual Tableau user group called Analytic Tag. And you have the 2 QR codes if you want to register. So first, some theory. That's why I was telling you that we have some boring slides first, because before playing an instrument, you need to learn the music, except if you are like a genius like Charlie Parker, that who apparently learned the instrument before even learn the music. But yes, still, that's at least the way I learn myself the LODs. So LOD stands for level of details. So this presentation is for a beginner and intermediate. So we will go through the basics, but I promise you we'll have some fun with something else than the Superstore database. So when we speak about level of detail, we speak about different things. It can be the level of detail of the data, of the visualization, or the calculation itself. So when we speak about level of detail of the data, we speak about the granularity of the data. So for instance, if we take the Superstore database, because everyone knows it, every row is a transaction, but it's not at the order level. It's at the product level. Because you have like a more detail than only the order ID. You go down into the product ID inside the order ID. Then, if we speak about the level of the V's, we are speaking about the granularity of the V's. So on this example, we have represent the sum of sale by segment. So the level of detail of the V's is a segment level. If I would have had now a category, subcategory, this level will change. So what affects the level in your V's? So the level of detail of the V's is affected by everything that you see in pink here. The page, the column, the row, the color, the size, the text, and obviously the detail. And then we have what we are meeting for the LOD expression. So the LOD expression, and I wanted to go through the syntax, but don't worry, we'll have like some example together of the basic before playing around. We have this LOD expression will give you more control over the granularity shown in the view. So it's always with a curly bracket. I search a name in English because I never remember. A keyword, so it can be fix, include, exclude, the different dimension where you want to play with, and an aggregated expression. And we will see the example, but before, let me explain you fix, include, exclude. I couldn't figure out when I start learning the LOD, and I find it very easy then when I finally understood like this. So for me, a fix allowed you to specify the aggregation or granularity independent of the field used in the view. So it's kind of, I want to fix my calculation at a certain level. And it's obvious, it's on the name, but until I make the connection in my brain, I couldn't like understood that. Include, calculate the result at the level less aggregated. I include a level of detail in my view. Whereas exclude, it's at a level more aggregated. I want to exclude a level of detail on my view. And now I stop here for the theory, and we will go into practice in Tableau. So I have some resources that I can give you. I have written some blog posts, very easy, but the ultimate resource is a blog post from Bethany Lyons. That is a top 15 LOD expression. It's very opened my eyes when I start learning this. So like I said, now enough theory, let's play a song or two. And we will see some very practical use case of the LOD when we want to do some cohort analysis, when we want to maintain a percentage, even while filtering, when we want like to analyze a customer acquisition or do some comparative analysis. So let me change. Oh my God, I'm so good at that now. Make the transition to Tableau. So the first three examples I have for you, it's just like to go through the expression, the tree expression, and it will be done on the Superstore dataset. The rest of the demo will be done using a music dataset, and it will be much more fun. So on this one, it's a map. Each single dot is a city. So the detail of my view here is the city level. Obviously, I have the state, the country, and I have the city. And it's not this one I want to start. It's a start, the same, except I haven't done the fixed calculation yet. And this one, so I said that by city, I have the sum of sale and I have the sum of profit. And let's imagine that's fine. I want to maintain this level of detail in my viz, but I want to add something else. I want to add, when I hover on the city, I want to add the sum of sales for the entire country. So to do that, I need to fix my calculation at the country level. So very easy. We will create a fixed calculation. Up. I will just make it bigger. So with Tableau, I just start fix. Maybe it's not big enough, so let me just write. I will start writing fix, and Tableau will already put the curly bracket for me. What I want to do, I have already the answer into my question. I want to fix the sum of sales on the country level, so I start writing fixed country sum of sales. And this dashboard is available on my Tableau public profile, so you can download it. You have always the question, the start, and the solution on it. So now if I just drag and drop into multi-tip, I have now my fixed calculation map. Obviously, I will give like another name, like the sum of sales at the country level, and I have 2 million. We can check if you would like, just by duplicate as a cross tab. Which will be there. And if I put the sum of sales, for instance, for Afghanistan, and I use the sum, we have 21,673. So I didn't make any mistake for this one. Don't worry, I will probably make a mistake. Last time I did like a demo at work, and I couldn't figure out when my calculation was not working. I will explain you later. So here it's like very easy calculation for the fix. And then I promise you I will do like an include. So here I have the sum of sales by segment. Let's imagine that I want to calculate the average of the sum of sales by country across a segment. Obviously, I can put category, sorry, sum of sales by category. I think I speak too quick, so I make mistake. So let me just move the camera, otherwise I don't see entire view. So obviously, if I add the category and I put my reference line, so by pane, and I say I want the label being the value, and I want that as an average. I could answer my question and add the average of the sum of sales by category across a segment, but it's not what I want. I want to avoid adding category. So just let's duplicate, and I will remove category of the view and remove the line to show you what I want to do. So if I don't want to modify my vis, but I still want to include my category, I will use a calculated field, include example. Okay. Again, I start writing include. I say I want to include the category. I want to calculate the sum of sales by category. I just have to close the bracket and find again my calculation. Okay. And then when I drag and drop, obviously I have to specify the aggregation that I want. And because I want the average, I select the average. And now, miracle, we have the same value. So here, focus a customer, the average of the sum of sales by category across the customer segment is 2,169,000, which is exactly the same that we will have add by adding the category into the view. Okay, the exclude one, and then I promise we don't touch the superstore anymore. So here I have the sales for each category and subcategory. But let's imagine that I want to calculate the sum per category. But I want to maintain the subcategory detail. Obviously here I had the total. Obviously there is a way to do it by just adding the total, but no, it's not what I want. I want bar charts everywhere. So I just put it here in order that you can check that the calculation is correct. So obviously I can just like write an exclude calculation. Okay, write exclude. And what I want to do is exclude the subcategory into my calculation. So yes, I want to exclude subcategory, put the sum of sales again. Okay, close it. And add it again into my view. And here you say, oh, Annabelle, something is wrong. Yes, because you have the bar that are correct, but you see here, I have still my label from the sum of sales, so I just have to remove it. And don't worry, I will explain where I make a mistake the other day. So here we have 4 million, which is the total across furniture. And you can ask me, you say probably, hey, Annabelle, if I would have done a fix, it would have been the same result. And yes, I have to agree with the fix. It will have been very similar. So very quickly, I just write a fix, my category, directly on the data pane. I put the sum of sales, and I will close it. Up, just to show you, because there is a difference. So because I forgot something. Exactly, so here Tableau say, hey, let's change the format, but no, I still want bar. So the calculation here is the same, but there is a difference. And the difference here is that the fix, it's totally independent of what will happen in my view. Whereas the exclude, the second column, it's not. It will depend on what happened in my view. So if I have a subcategory filter, that you were wondering what it was on the right? And I will say, like, for instance, I remove bookcase and table. The fix sum by category will not change, whereas the other one will change. So it's like, I mean, I could have done the contrary, so at least it will not look weird, but it's exactly the same. This fix doesn't change. It's totally independent of the level of detail in my view. And that is something that is very important in Tableau. It's related to the order of operation. The fix is the first pink square, a rectangle that you see, and the fix LOD is compute before any dimension filter happen in the view. Whereas the include and the exclude will be compute after the dimension filter. That's why you have like such a difference. You have always way to change that. So for instance, if you would like that my dimension filter affect my fix LOD, you will have to use a context filter. Again, another example later. So that is the basic about LOD. Now let's have some fun and play with a data source about music, right? So on this data source about music is all the data from the Billboard. I think that from several decades, I think I have like 58 as a starting point, we will see. Here's an example. Yes, I select Elton John. We have a comment about that.
How did you know what I was listening to on the way into work this morning?
So we have like a singer, we have a lot of data inside. We have a lot of singers, the decade where the song were released. We have a lot of songs. We have the position of the songs for every which it reached the Billboard 100. And obviously the position, so we can calculate the number of weeks they stay on chart and this kind of things. So the first question that I will have, I would like to calculate the percentage of distinct songs per year across the entire dataset. So here, very easy, I just write the decade, the year, for which they appear on chart, and I put the count distinct, just like to earn some time. So we have, for instance, in 90, which is funny, it was in 1966, if we look like, it's the year that more songs were released on the Billboard. So maybe they didn't stay so long, but they were like a very productive year. Anyway, so if we have like 832 songs in 1966, if I just like calculate the percentage of total, just like by drag and drop and click a quick table calculation, percentage of total, I will have that in 66, if we maintain, the number of songs that were released in 66 were like 2.9 or 97% of the total songs that were always released, like on the global dataset. So that's fine. But if now I play with a filter, and I know that you see me coming. If I know I select only the decade 1960, the 60s, and I hit apply, obviously the number of songs doesn't change, but so does the percentage of total, which now has 100% for the decade 1960s. For the 60s. And why? It's again this order of operation that tell me that the table calculation is now the third pink on the right, is calculated after the dimension filter. So first, the dimension filter on decade is applied, and then the table calculation is calculated. So here, having used an LOD, it's a very good trick to maintain the percentage of total. So let's do that. We will create a calculation. I will use a fix. Don't worry, during the example, we'll use a lot of fix, but from time to time also an exclude and an include. So fixed percentage of total, because that's what I want to do, is fix my percentage of total. So here, let me make it the bigger I can for you. And here, what I want to do, it's a fix, so not so quick, Annabelle, not so quick. So I can just drag and drop the already percentage of total before. What I want to do here is change that. I want to calculate the condistinct of the song ID, but divide it by something else. So what I want to do, it's divided by the sum, but I could use the minimum. Here it's not a problem. And I want to write a fix. By the way, fix is the only instruction that you can avoid to write. So I can write something very easy like this and write the condistinct of song ID. Okay, so now it's me fighting with all the parentheses. Looks good. Okay. So if now I drag and drop it, and I can change the format, so it looks like a percentage to decimal, let's see, so we can check. And we go back to 1966. We should have the 2.68%. And I can display now all the decades and maybe change just like this, so it's easier. So now obviously we have the same percentage on both cases, but now my fixed calculation will be very useful to maintain the percentage of total, even though I have like a filter on the decade. Very useful, I use that all the time. Something else that I use all the time, it's with cohort analysis. So often you need to calculate, for instance, here it's with like, and I will not do the demo, so I didn't lie, with the global superstore. We want, for instance, to have like how much my sales from this year come from the customer that I have acquired like this year or 2 years ago. So how the way to read that is like in 2015, because I have a very old superstore database, 21% of my sales, almost 22% of my sales come from customer that I have acquired in 2013. Why did I choose this one? That is very complicated for me to pronounce. I don't know. So that's the kind of analysis that we do that. And for doing it, I will not do it with this one. I will do it with cohort analysis using my songs. So here, let's imagine, so I already pre-filter on decade 90s. So it's like a little clearer or easier to read. And the idea is to create, so the first time a song appear. So the first year a song appear on the chart. So this chart will be very messy. So I already tell you. So let's add it bigger I can. So my idea is like I want to fix. Very easy. I want to fix. For every song ID, I want to determine and fix it. What is the minimum of my weeks? So my week calculation is a week in which they appear on charts. So every week I have the position of every song that is on the billboard. So to create kind of a cohort analysis, I will have to write a calculation like this. So like this, I know that this song ID appear for the first time this year. So if I just apply here, first year a song appear, exactly. And I had it in color, be ready to be blown away by all this color. It's not It's not very useful yet, but I want like to show you how it's done. And so like this, we can see something quite interesting, obviously, that the song that appear, for instance, in 1990 on the chart come from the vast majority from 1990. It's new songs, totally fine. But we have also like songs, obviously, from the previous year, but we have like a lot of songs also from, if I had like 1965, from different decades. It's not like from 1 year or 2 years ago, it's like completely from different decades. So when I saw that, I think that I thought that it would be interesting to do more or less the same cohort analysis, but this time in the decades. So it's a little less messy and much more insightful. So now, instead of focusing in 90s, I put all my year, how many songs that I have for every year and the decade. And I will do exactly the same. So this time I will not create it because I already created together some time, because I have much more interesting calculation to show you later. Here's the first decade, a song appear on the chart. It's the same more or less syntax. I fix for every song which is the minimum of the decade. Instead of the minimum of week, now I put the minimum of the decade here. And I had it in color. Again, we see that the majority of the song come from the same decades, but we have like some exception. So to make it more obvious, I will create a calculation. And again, here, I will already show it to you because this one is also simple. This calculation just check if it's from this decade or not. Is the decade that I am currently on is also the first decade of the song. So if I just added that on my view, and I say I want to keep only, yes, this one.
Right.
When there are differences, I see that people are following, that's good. And I will add a quick table calculation, percentage of total, and go again and say, hey, I want this percentage of total being by first decade. So what I have here, I have like, I will guide through because I have seen this chart a lot of time, but for you it's the first time. What I have here, it's like something very interesting. So for instance, if we focus on the 80s, I have, for among the songs that are not from the 80s, I have a lot of songs that are from the 70s. I have some songs that are the 60s, so like 2 decades before. Something very curious also is on the on 20s, on 2000, I don't know, 2000 something. You have only 3 years, meaning that there is only 3 years that have songs that doesn't belong from the same decade. That I found that very interesting, that maybe we were like so close up for whatever songs came from this period that we didn't check, or the old song didn't come back. But more interesting is what happened in all 2010, 2011, and so on and so forth. We had a lot of songs coming from a long time ago. So we have songs from the 50s, from the 60s, the 17th. For instance, if I ask you what happened in 2016, so we have songs from the 80s or the 17th. Do you have like an explanation?
Streaming services. Spotify and iTunes. Yeah.
No, it's like sadder. It's a sadder explanation. We had Prince, for instance. Prince died in 2016. So all his old songs came back on chart, and came back on chart very, very hard and very, yeah. So often it's like, if you go after on the V's and you can check, we had like also songs from George Michael, Michael Jackson, he came back on the year of their death. Sometimes it's not so sad, sometimes it's a biopic. For instance, a biopic from Queen, when it was released, all the songs from the dedicate decades, come back on chart and had a lot of success. So it's a very interesting. This data set is like full of cool stuff.
Yeah.
It's not 50s there.
But I haven't finished with you. So we will go back with Elton John again. I know you love Elton John. And one question that I have, and that was LOD are very, very useful, is when we want to compare different phenomena, but the phenomena which has not the same start date. So for instance, if I want to compare the evolutions of all the Elton John songs since their release, so I could like say, okay, I have on song ID already on detail. And by the way, here you see that I have put a context filter. I don't need a context filter. I can, but I will remove it later so you see that I don't need it. Because I had song ID. If I will have just a song title, I will need this context filter because I want that my fixed LOD is affected by that. But because I have the song ID, it's unique. And if I use only the song title, it's not, because there is several songs across different performers that have the same name. So anyway, I will put my weak position in rows. And because I am interested of the evolution, I would like to have to change the axis. I would like to have a reverse axis. So when it arrives on chart, maybe at the bottom of the 90 position, to see that is increasing until reaching maybe the top 10 or the top 15. So I put the weak position here on rows, and I can put a week, for instance, to see the evolution. So I will change here to have the exact date. And that's great, but it's very complicated to represent and to analyze. Elton John has such a career that, I mean, he has songs released in the 70s, and he has songs released on 2001, meaning that they are very difficult to read. Yes, I can see that this song, your song from Elton John, appear on the chart at the 89 position in November 70, and that increased, but how do I compare the different songs together? And here is very useful if I could create a calculation that tell me the position of the songs since its release. For instance, when you arrive on the chart, it arrives at this position. Through 3 weeks ago, his evolution, his position on the chart is, I don't know, 10th position and so on and so forth. And like this, I harmonize all my songs to follow the same principle. And that is since the release date. So to do that, we'll create a calculation. I don't know how I will call it, but number of weeks since release, maybe. Alors, since release. Okay. And what I will do, again, I have to increase. I will calculate the date diff in terms of week between the first time he arrived on chart, which is a calculation that we have done before. It's like a fixed song ID by minimum of week, and the week. So like this, I calculate for every of the songs the different in terms of weeks, and that is what I will use here in column. So don't worry, I just put the dimensions and everything will be clearer. So here, if I add light, I see that the majority of the songs arrive on the Billboard chart, maybe 70 position or 80 position. They increase their position on the chart, maybe until the week 10, and start decreasing until leaving the chart on the 15 weeks. But there is songs that stay longer. So we have songs that stay after 20 weeks. We have songs that arrive first position on the chart, stay for 13 weeks, and go down slowly until leaving the chart after 41 weeks. And so maybe we want to highlight the one that stay more than 20 weeks. So to do that, we can create a calculation again, number of weeks on chart that we will use on color. And what I will do is like just create again. I like to create fixed calculation, is my favorite, but don't worry, we will have like some example for the other one, I promise. That's why I'm speeding up, like to give you like the max. So I can fix the sound ID distinct of the week. So here, nothing very particular. And I can obviously say, okay, I want to test if that is like bigger than 20 weeks, I said, more than 20 weeks, so it's like this. I can apply and then use this true and false calculation into color. Weirdly enough, my Tableau is in English, but I think my operating system is in French. That's why you have like true for vrai and the blue is false. But I can change that in color, like having a very light gray and whatever I put. I decided it was a blue like this. Exactly, maybe not the best combination, but okay, fine. So you see that. So here we have like 6 songs that stay more than 20 weeks on chart. And it's like a little more digestible, exactly because you want to compare songs that are not even from the same decades. And LOD is like a very powerful tool, I would say, to do this kind of analysis. Then 2 additional, and I promise after I stop speaking and you can start having fun in between you, is like and enjoying being in like a presential meetup to speak and have drinks and networking, is like something that is very useful with LODs, is when, for instance, you want to compare something to something else. For instance, let's imagine that I want to compare the songs from Elton John, which is called Your Songs, with the other Elton Johns. So here I have all the songs, the number of weeks they stay on chart. So the song I have selected is like Your Song, that I don't even know where it is, but you will find here at the bottom, look at that, it stayed 14 weeks. And I want to compare these 14 weeks to the other songs. So how do I do that? I will do that by creating first a calculation. So the number of week, selected song. I will increase. And here I will say, okay, my song. By the way, I create already a parameter because I will play with it. That is called song to compare. And for the moment, the value of the parameter song to compare is your song. So if song equals song to compare, then week, nothing out of the ordinary. And now I want the number of weeks, so I will start writing condistinct. I will do the condistinct of this formula. Okay, so now if I drag and drop into my column, I see that I have 1 bar for 14 and 0 for the rest. I know that there is a problem. The problem is coming. I won't like that it's obvious for everyone. So now if I calculate the difference with the selected, because that's what I want to do, what I want to do is like, okay, I want for every rows on my data set, calculate the condistinct of the week. And I will increase and deduce the number of week that I just number of week. Is it like this one? I should like just drag and drop the current one. It will be easier. Okay, the number of week of my selected song, like the calculation that I just created. So if I cannot find it different, that's the problem when you have on the same dashboard like the demo and the solution. You have a lot of different calculations, but that's why I was writing demo if you were like asking. And so when I drag and drop this calculation, it's not doing what I want. It's not doing 14 minus 15. It's like saying, here you have 14 minus 14, 0. Here you have 15 minus 0, 15. Because what I have here is the detail by song. And like you remember, I don't want it. I want that exclude this, this level of detail. So to fix it, I will need to exclude. And here it's like the demo, when I did the demo internally, of the same demo, I make a mistake. And instead of writing song, I wrote song ID. And it was not working because I was telling Tableau, hey, please exclude the song ID. And he was telling me, no, it's not in the view. So I couldn't figure out why I had a mistake. Anyway, so here I didn't do the mistake. So what I want is to exclude the song from my view on my calculation and take the number of weeks. Obviously, Tableau tells me that I need an aggregation. I will just add the minimum, for instance, and it will be fine. So now when I hit apply and OK, it's doing what I want to do. So that is calculate the difference between the 14 and the different value that I have by songs. And I can obviously change that, put that in color, add interior view that you see. Not that it's very beautiful, but at least that is like something more obvious. So it's very useful to have this kind of LODs capability for you, because you can really like push forward. Just as a bonus, you can obviously go to worksheet, action, and say, okay, now I will create, so let's remove that, and we will create like a parameter action, change a parameter, change a song, and then we will select a song. The target parameter song to compare will be changing, and clearly the selection, you can keep the current value. By doing that, you see now the value change here. If we take like some songs that are a little more like successful, you have also the analyst that change, and obviously on the title, because on the title I also use a parameter. The last example that I found very useful is, okay, so how do I define success? I have been counting the number of weeks. Here I can say, okay, maybe it's the number of songs by singer. And in that case, we have GleeCast, all the Glee series that release a lot of songs. We had 183 songs on the Billboard chart, which is the most that any other writer or singer have ever done. But is that defining success? And I think that maybe we can do a little more. And where I see that is that maybe we could create and say that maybe the way to define success is to see which singer has the most songs that stay above a certain threshold. So to do that, I create already a parameter that is called X week on chart, and we will be playing around and putting 25 or whatever you want. And we will like calculate for every singer how many songs he has that stay more than 20 weeks. So the last two calculations, I mean, I know that you are like tired. So first I will calculate the difference in terms of weeks with the target. And this calculation, obviously, I need to do it on the song level, because not on the singer level, but I don't have the song on my view. So you see me coming. I need to include into my calculation that I will use in my view, I need to include the song ID. And I will, for every song ID, calculate the count distinct of the week and calculate the difference between the count of the song ID with the parameter X week on board. So to make it a little more dynamic. Okay. And then I will calculate the number of songs that are successful according to my criteria. Which is up. So what I will do is like I will test the previous calculation, the difference of week with the target. And I will say if my difference of week with the target is positive, then I will add a 1. If it's not, I will add a 0. And that is what I will be counting on my view. So let's search for it. Okay. And now it's already the aggregation I want because it's a sum. And you see the story, it's much different. So now I have, like, for instance, Taylor Swift that has 10 songs that that stay more than 25 weeks on chart. And if now I sorted this value, it's Taylor Swift and with Rihanna and Pink. So let's put 30. Who do you think will win? Any ideas? Who? Okay, if I put 30, it's still Taylor Swift. But if we change that and we put 15, we have like a different story. So for instance, 15 songs, Madonna has 37 songs that stay more than on chart.
Right.
And now it's finished. You are free to go. So thank you very much for hearing me. I hope that you enjoy the presentation. If you have any question, I'm still here.
Very, very useful. LODs always make my head hurt, but that's maybe a lot clearer. Thank you. Any questions in the room for Annabelle? I think everyone can smell the beer, Annabelle.
Yeah, they all fell asleep. I'm sure of that.
Any questions online, Jackie?
No, not online, thanks.
Okay, well, brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Annabelle. Really,
Thank
really
you.
helpful. Thank
Have
you.
a good evening. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks. So hopefully you've all enjoyed that. I will try and get all the slides over to everyone that's attended. Dave, do you want to give us the lowdown on where we go for refreshments?
It's basically sit down there.